The following program does not offer personal medical advice. Please consult your doctor before using any treatment or product we cover. Welcome to Go to Health Media with your host, Jonathan Marks. We provide a welcoming environment where experts educate you on important health topics, answer your questions, and provide information from which you can benefit in consultation with your doctor. You can visit and subscribe to the show at gotohealthmedia.com. And now, here is Jonathan Marks. Hey everyone, this is Jonathan Marks from Go to Health. How are you today? We're back with another great episode. Are you or someone you know beginning to suspect your child may be having mental health difficulty? Anxiety, depression, irregular eating, social isolation, inability to concentrate. 50%, I didn't know this, but 50% of all mental health conditions start to appear before the age of 14. And a growing number of children and teens in the U.S. are struggling with mental health conditions, but parents, teachers, and other caregivers are often at a loss when concerns arise. To help address the rising concerns of parents and caregivers who are struggling to navigate children's mental health, the National Alliance on Mental Illness, that's NAMI, N-A-M-I, has released its new book called You Are Not Alone for Parents and Caregivers. This book provides comprehensive, compassionate, and practical guidance for families, educators, caregivers, and mental health professionals to support their children through mental health challenges. With us today is the author of this new book, Christine Crawford, MD, MPH. She is the Associate Medical Director for the National Alliance on Mental Illness, NAMI, which is the country's largest grassroots mental health organization. She's an assistant professor of psychiatry and vice chair of education at the Boston University School of Medicine. She also provides outpatient psychiatric care to children and adolescents at Boston Medical Center. Additionally, she's the medical director for the Boston Public Health Commission's school-based clinician program, in which she provides direct guidance on how to best support the socio-emotional well-being of children within the Boston public school system. Welcome to Go to Health, Christine. How are you today?
I'm doing great. Thanks so much for having me today.
Good. So what advice would you give parents unsure if their child's behavior is typical or needs intervention? How do we know?
Yeah, it's so difficult because there oftentimes isn't a roadmap that's given to parents to understand how to recognize signs and symptoms of mental health issues in their kids. So a lot of parents are scratching their heads when they notice some changes in their kids' behavior. But what I tell parents is that, number one, just notice your kid. If you start to see that there's a change in a pattern in which they are functioning, to be curious about what's behind that change. And so once you notice that there is some subtle differences in terms of how they're behaving and how they're feeling, to have a conversation with your kid, but to approach the conversation from a place of curiosity rather than approaching it with making assumptions about what's going on with them. And so say things like, well, I've noticed that you haven't wanted to hang out with your friends as often, or I've noticed that you've been missing school. What's behind that change? And it could share with you kind of what are some of the challenges that they're experiencing, and that will allow you to understand what they're going through and to get the help and support that they need.
Good. So you're really highlighting to notice what your kid is like and notice changes in the child's behavior or approach to life and different things. So it's really to be notice what changes are happening and then kind of get curious about it.
Yes, and it sounds like such a simple thing to notice your kid, but we live in such a fast-paced world in which we are just trying to focus on how can we get through the day. And we're not really noticing our kids. We're not able to be as fully present and to have opportunities to connect with our kids. So we're missing all of these opportunities to, see if there are these changes. But yes, it's so important for us to slow down and to just notice our children.
What kind of symptoms have you seen from kids that perhaps really worsened during COVID? What should are there hangovers from the COVID time that kids are still dealing with?
Yeah, so what we have seen over recent years, especially during COVID, is that rates of depression have gone up, especially in young kids, kids as young as 5 years old,
Mm.
experiencing symptoms of depression. And then some young kids are experiencing more severe forms of depression in which they might have thoughts about hurting themselves. We've also seen rates of anxiety triple over the last few years. And then also trauma. Trauma has had such an impact on our kids, and the pandemic was quite traumatic. Because of that, we're seeing a lot of behavioral changes, kids who are dysregulated, who are having a hard time coping with really big, intense emotions. So I'm seeing all of that, and that seems to have kind of carried over from the pandemic.
And traumatic in what ways? Can you give us some examples?
So a lot of kids experience loss during that period of time
Mm.
and multiple losses, whether that was actual family members, friends, but they also lost a sense of normalcy. They lost this sense of routine, a sense of safety, and a sense of having an understanding of what to expect next. This was an extended period of time in which kids' worlds were completely turned upside down and the sense of certainty went out the window. So that created a lot of anxiety during that period of time. And also, parents and adults were struggling themselves. They
Yeah.
were struggling to find tools and strategies to cope. And kids were looking at the adults in their lives for how to manage and navigate this really challenging time. And so, adults are the mental health models in the lives of kids. And when adults are struggling, the kids are going to struggle too. And so adults were experiencing a lot of trauma, and some of that trauma, unfortunately, was passed over to our kids. And we're seeing some of the mental health manifestations of that even now.
So true. What are some tips if you're concerned about your child's mental health? What are some tips for parents to do next? What do we do?
Yeah, so if you actually have a concern about your child's mental health, I often tell people to go to your pediatrician, go to your kid's primary care provider, because mental health issues are primary care issues. A lot of caregivers and parents don't realize that if you have a concern about depression or anxiety in your kid, you
Mhm.
can actually call the pediatrician's office and schedule an urgent visit, a sick visit for a mental health concern. We're so accustomed to calling the doctor when we have a headache or some kind of physical ailment, but you can actually do the same if you have a mental health worry with your child. So the pediatrician is a good place to start. They're actually the front lines, they're serving on the front lines of this mental health crisis in kids, and they can point families in the right direction for how they can get some additional mental health supports.
Great. So that's really reassuring for parents to know that if they're concerned, all they have to do is call the pediatrician. It's somebody they know, trust, go to, and the child knows them, and that's the first stop.
Absolutely, because the reality is that there are not enough child and adolescent psychiatrists, there's not enough child psychologists in the country to meet the growing demands, the growing mental health needs of kids. And so really reaching out to the pediatricians, primary care providers can be helpful because a lot of people are waiting many months to see me for an appointment, and kids don't have time to wait for that help and treatment. So reaching out to primary care is a helpful solution.
So, what kind of training do pediatricians have in mental health?
So that's a really great question because actually in recent years, there's been a shift to incorporating more mental health training for pediatricians during their 3 years of pediatric residency. And so there have been a lot of programs that have partnered with departments of psychiatry to have more sessions, more clinical sessions that are focused on recognizing and diagnosing mental health conditions and teaching pediatricians on how to become more comfortable prescribing psychiatric medications to kids. And then also there's a lot of training with established pediatricians to be available for psychiatrists to be available for pediatricians to call us, to consult with us if they happen to have a kid who's struggling with a mental health issue. So there's more and more of an emphasis in mental health training when we're thinking about our future pediatricians, because again, as I mentioned before, the pediatricians are on the front lines of this youth mental health crisis, and we need to make sure that we are equipping them with all the tools that they need in order to navigate this.
Again, this is so comforting. If you have a concern about your child's mental illness, all you have to do is call the pediatrician. They can help. They're trained. They have a certain degree of training. They can also prescribe medications as needed, and they can also consult with or refer you to a child psychiatrist if that's necessary.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Great. So, Christine, tell us about your new book. It's called You Are Not Alone for Parents and Caregivers. And why did you write the book?
Yes. So I wrote this book because kids are struggling and parents are struggling. And a lot of folks don't know where to go when it comes to helping support their kid who has a mental health problem. They don't know where to start. And as a mother myself of two young girls, there's a lot of anxiety that comes to providing the right sort of guidance around how to navigate your own emotional development and your kids' development. So I wanted to have a comprehensive guide or a resource that's available for parents that they can go to, that they can actually reference all throughout their child's development. I cover topics such as how to talk to your kid about mental health issues, how to know if your kid actually has a mental health challenge, and how to appreciate some of the unique aspects of your child's brain and how it is they think about things in the world. And then I go through how all the different mental health conditions like anxiety, depression, and trauma, how they can present in kids as young as 3, as well as all the way up to the age of 18. And then I also interviewed over 80 people with lived experience. These are adults who happen to be teachers, parents themselves, young adults. And I also interviewed kids so that they can share their words of wisdom for our readers on how to navigate this mental health journey. And so this is a really comprehensive guide, a how-to guide on how to support a kid's mental health.
Great. So this book again is called You Are Not Alone for Parents and Caregivers. Where can we go to learn more, Christine?
So you can go to nami.org/book. So that's NAMI.org book. And you can learn more about NAMI there, as well as there are links to where you could purchase the book on that website as well.
Great. So it's NAMI.org. That's NAMI.org/book. Correct?
That's right. That's correct.
Good. So a last question, Christine. We as adults may know what anxiety or depression feels like or looks like. How does it differ in children? How would we recognize it? Is it the same, or are there differences because of age?
Yeah, so there's certainly differences because of age, and that's why it's so hard for parents to be able to appreciate how anxiety can look in kids, because they're often kind of comparing it to how anxiety manifests in adults. But what we see in kids is that kids can actually be quite irritable when they're experiencing anxiety. And in addition to the irritability, they can also present as quite distracted. And so oftentimes people confuse symptoms of anxiety with symptoms of ADHD. Because if you're an anxious child, sometimes you are so consumed with worried thoughts that it's hard for you to be fully present and engaged in the moment. And so you may appear distracted, you may appear forgetful, it's hard for you to concentrate. And so oftentimes those are clear symptoms of anxiety in kids that often are overlooked.
Wow, that's great. That's so good to know. And I appreciate so much your being on the show with us to share this information. It's so important, especially in these days of post-COVID and readjusting to the world, hopefully, which stays normal for a while.
Hopefully, hopefully. Thanks so much for having me and for this conversation.
Good. Thanks so much. So we've been talking with Christine Crawford, MD, MPH. She's the Associate Medical Director for the National Alliance on Mental Illness, which is NAMI, N-A-M-I, which is the country's largest grassroots mental health organization. She is an Assistant Professor of Psychiatry and Vice Chair of Education at Boston University School of Medicine, and she also provides outpatient psychiatric care to children and adolescents at Boston Medical Center. Thanks so much for being with us today, Christine. It's been great to have you.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Take care. Until next time, everybody, remember, go to health. See you again next time. Thank you for tuning in this week to Go to Health Media. Be sure to join Jonathan Marks and another health expert next time. You can also catch the program on your favorite podcast platform. Until our next show, be sure to visit us on the web at gotohealthmedia.com and elevate your life.